Let's get into some of the football here. I think, we saw the Ben Watson saying he's going to sign with the Patriots. He visited New England. Seahawks reach a one-year deal with Ziggy Ansah. So we're starting to see some veteran players sign, John. And, this is all because, the compensation stuff is kind of behind them. And you think there are other bigger names, moderate, bigger names, I say, because they're bigger than some of the guys that no one's heard of before. People have heard of Ben Watson. Ziggy Ansah is actually a pretty big name. Are there other guys still out there that you are intrigued by where they could land?
Yeah, Ziggy was the biggest name along with Ndamukong Suh, so they were the top two guys. But anybody who was listening to this show, I told you, don't worry about Ziggy and the Eagles. It's not even a possibility. And that kind of borne itself out today. I mentioned he'd get a bigger role somewhere. It ended up being Seattle. Buffalo was interested, New Orleans, but the Eagles just didn't have a role for him. Same thing with a player like Ndamukong Suh. But, Mike, somebody's got a big name. People want him.
Yeah, and you mentioned here, he'd be great here, but he's not going to take the role. It's weird that the Eagles would not, approach it and, they're fixated on this role to say, hey, we could get this player. Let's say Ziggy Ansah says, hey, I want to play for the Eagles, that they would be unwilling to maybe change their role for a player like that.
Well, understand it costs significant money, even the time, because you have to realize the reason Ziggy Ansah was not signed was because of a shoulder injury, not because he's not a good player. And he ended up getting, I think, $5.5 million, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's $8 million of easily, as long as he plays, guaranteed incentives. So you're talking about $13.5, $14 million. So this is a significant player. So that's part of it as well. The Eagles could afford it, no question about it. But if you're going to pay somebody $14 million, that's a three-down player. That's a starter. And if you're bringing in him to be a starter, that means Derek Barnett isn't a starter, and that's your number one pick. From a couple of years ago, we know how Howie Roseman feels about his guys. It wasn't going to happen. It was never going to happen.
Nope, and he signs with Seattle, who, Seattle's interesting. This was a team last year that kind of came out of nowhere that made the play. I say come out of nowhere. I mean, Russell Wilson. But a lot of people didn't think that was a playoff team, and they had to add a player like this. That's a team that a lot of people thought was on the decline, and now they get a nice player on the defense after they traded Michael Bennett away last year. They ended up making the playoffs. I thought that was a very good move by them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did expect Seattle to take a step back last season, and they really didn't. I think a lot of that goes to just how impressive Russell Wilson was as a whole. They're certainly more from what they were when they won a Super Bowl, went to a Super Bowl. They were essentially a play away from going back-to-back. That team was the greatest defense of the generation. It's no longer like that. No more Legion of Boom. Interesting shift, though. Certainly Ziggy is a big potential pass rusher. L.J. Collier was their first-round pick, another pass rusher. But remember, they traded Frank Clark, and that's their best pass rusher and a proven guy. So a little bit of a give and take. And it's kind of surprising. Frank's had some off-the-field issues, no question about that. But as I said, if Ziggy's healthy, you can understand it if you're going young and you don't want to pay somebody significant money and you want a younger player on a rookie contract to save money for the salary cap. But they're going to pay Ziggy a lot of money if he's healthy. So it's a little strange to me.
Ben Watson is going to go back and play with the Patriots on a one-year deal. It's obvious that they need a new tight end. And Watson's story is kind of an interesting one to kind of head back there, coming home, going back to New England, 38-year-old, one of their first-round draft picks, going back, he was in like 2005, right before that Eagles Super Bowl. But they needed to get a guy in there. And you wonder, if losing, they've won a lot without Gronk. Like, they've won games without him. But I think this is interesting to see that he's not going to be there all season, and they're going to have to kind of build an offense around somebody different.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what the Patriots have done. If you think about everybody, and literally everybody except Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, it's basically 2 decades now. So they've won a lot of different ways with a lot of different formulas, and they're just shifting again to a different formula. And I think everyone is kind of writing them off. They seem to write them off every year. And ultimately it will happen whenever Tom Brady does descend as a quarterback. But, proof is in the pudding. I mean, Super Bowl.
Right.
They lose to the Eagles, but they come back and they beat the Rams. And if you think about this time last year, Mike, people were writing them off, said they were done. The Eagles blitzed them in the Super Bowl, went up and down the field. They had nothing left. And then they come back and win it. So, I've seen them win with 2 tight ends. Gronk is obviously one of the best tight ends ever. You remember the Randy Moss era where they just killed everybody over the top. They won with defense. You think about Ty Law back in the day playing different positions. They've done it so many different ways. It's hard to write them off.
Yeah. Let me ask you, everybody's kind of getting to their mini camps and the rookie stuff this weekend. The Eagles will have theirs starting tomorrow. By the way, Doug Peterson will speak tomorrow, so we'll have plenty of Eagles conversation. I want to kind of look inside the NFC East a little bit today, but is New England with Brady and where he's at age-wise still your favorite in the AFC? And maybe even to win the Super Bowl again?
Well,
you enter the training camps thinking, hey, it's still them.
Well, I will say this. Part of the Patriots' success starts with their division and the fact that everybody else in that division has been so bad for a pretty significant period of time. I think that continues. Miami, I think, has one of the worst talent situations in the NFL. If you think about their roster from top to bottom, I think the Jets are improving. I think the Bills are improving. But let's be honest, they're not there. So if you start out with 5, say, even if you win 5 of 6 division games, you got a leg up. So I would say, yeah, they're not the most talented team, but they haven't been for a while now. But when you can get home field advantage, we know how impressive that was, how important that was for the Eagles and their run. That helps a lot. And because of the division they play in, they're certainly going to start every conversation, and they should, as the favorites in the AFC.
We've mentioned camps for the mini camp start for a lot of these teams. We're going to take a look at some of the teams inside the NFC East here. One, I want to look at Washington first. Case Keenum says, my job is to help this team win. Is Case Keenum even the starting quarterback for the Washington Redskins?
Well, he might be week 1, but I don't think it would last very long. And I say this about every time a team takes a quarterback in the first round of the draft, especially the earlier, even more so. And Haskins is essentially right in the middle of the first round of 15 overall. But if you start a season and you're ineffective and you're not a good team and you've taken a quarterback with a first-round pick, there's incredible pressure to get that quarterback on the field. And obviously when you have a bridge like Case Keenum, who's obviously not the long-term answer, the narrative becomes, well, he's not our future anyway, so we might as well get to the future as quickly as possible. So he might be the starter week 1, but I don't think he'll be the starter week 8.
No, the interesting thing, they don't have a whole heck of a lot to compete with. I mean, they do have Colt McCoy. They hope he's back for training camp. But, I mean, if you're not going with Case Keenum, who's, nothing special, man, that team's really gone out of control.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. They understand, and it was bad luck that Alex Smith suffered the injury he did. They had to go out and get a Band-Aid quarterback. And to be honest, I think Case Keenum's probably one of the better Band-Aids you can get. But even before they drafted Dwayne Haskins, the thought was there was going to be a legitimate competition between Case Keenum and Colt McCoy. Now, ultimately, I think Case would have won that battle. I mean, he's played in this league. He's had success in this league. He's better than Colt McCoy. That's not saying he's great by any stretch of the imagination, but Haskins changes the dynamic. And when you have that quarterback, there's going to be pressure to get him on the field. Now, also, Mike, you also have to throw into the mix, Jay Gruden could be coaching for his job.
Yeah.
And if he needs
that was going to be my follow-up here is how important is this quarterback position for the coach? I mean, if I'm the coach, I don't want to be tied to this quarterback.
Well, see, I think of it the opposite way. If you say you're battling for a wild card, I don't think there's any way Washington could win the division. But if it's a bad year on the NFC side for the wild cards and maybe it takes 9 wins to get in, we know about the parity in this league. If everything goes your way, perhaps you're in a position. And if you're doing that and you need to get into the playoffs to keep your job, you probably want the veteran out there, not the rookie. It's not an insult to the rookie because long-term, that's the better way. But short-term, you want the guy who knows what he's doing. Which
kind of leads me into what's going on in New York with the Giants. I mean, you got a new second year now, going into his second year is why is his name slipping me? Shermer. Yeah, Pat Shermer. And obviously, at some point, he's going to have to untie himself from Eli Manning and go to Daniel Jones. Now, Jones, we're going to see in mini camps here, he's going to have to walk right into a very difficult situation out there. And I think it puts Shermer into a tough situation at how he balances and makes this switch.
Well, New York is always a tough situation, but I think from ownership standpoint, well, first of all, I'll say I think Pat Shermer is thrilled to have the ability to untie himself from Eli Manning. Number one, I know him. I understand how he thinks. He knows Eli can't play. I said that last year. So I think he's thrilled to get Daniel Jones in there. It probably is going to be a struggle with a rookie quarterback. It always is. It typically is. His case is a little different. I don't think they even have the ability to reach for a wild card spot. I think that's a bad football team, whether it's Eli Manning, whether it's Daniel Jones. They're not going to be in that type of position. So I think ownership understands this has sort of morphed into a 3-year project with a young quarterback, and they have him in place now, and it starts now. So you forget about last season. They're going to get Jones on the field as quickly as possible, and then it becomes how much do you help the acceleration of him as a prospect. That's what I think Pat Shermer is going to be judged on.
Yeah, and, the whole, when they make that turn to Daniel Jones and what kind of, how he walks into this situation and kind of, handles the room. I mean, that's such an odd thing is, hey, I'm the guy that got drafted to take this guy's job, and this guy knows it. And it goes on everywhere, but this is almost a different situation because the expectations for this team aren't very good with the other guy, and he's going to start the season off.
Yeah, not necessarily even so. You've seen the rumor, the stories come out of North Jersey past couple of days, and they've kind of been – they're starting to shape the narrative, and that what was coming out this week is that, hey, if we need him to start week 1, we think Daniel Jones can start week 1. So you're seeing the sea change already, and they're ramping people up. I think a lot of the problem with the Giants is they've created this situation, and they've lived on this sort of legacy for too long, and nostalgia, whatever you want to call it. And they've had a tough time taking the medicine when it comes to Eli Manning. I think they finally turned that corner, and I don't think it has much to do. I don't think he's all that relevant any longer. I really don't. They finally said
to the point where they wouldn't start him to start the year.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me if Eli starts the year. It would surprise me, same as I said in Washington. It would surprise me greatly if he's still the starter halfway through the season. But if he didn't start week one, wouldn't surprise me at all. It depends how quickly Daniel Jones picks it up. And if they think he's ready to not embarrass himself, if they think he's in that position, I think there's a good chance. There's a reason that story was floated out there, and that's because they're starting to go in that direction.
Let's go to Dallas. Dak Prescott, Amari Cooper. These guys, they need some money. Ezekiel Elliott, Dallas has an interesting situation staring at them in the face, especially with the quarterback situation, but he's got new toys, and they want to sign them all. So you see an interesting stare down coming in Dallas with those guys.
Yeah. Well,
and the Ezekiel Elliott thing is very interesting.
Yeah, it's what happens when you have star players and they get off their rookie contracts and getting to their second deals, and it's the cost of doing business, especially at the quarterback position. That's more difficult. People have brought up just because of the nature, the devaluation of the position at running back, do you want to pay a running back significant money? We had the same conversation when the Cowboys were thinking about taking Ezekiel Elliott in the top 5. Can you do that? Well, you can. It's not that big of a deal for the first 4 years. When you get to the 5th-year option and you get to the second contract, then it becomes a big deal because then you got to pay this running back all this money. And generally, the NFL doesn't believe you should do that. The Giants are going to have the same issue a couple years down the road with Saquon Barkley. And this is why we have these discussions on should running backs be drafted that high in the NFL, in the modern NFL. And my opinion is no, they shouldn't. And this is the exact reason why. Because you can bring in a lesser player and get similar, not as good. By no means am I saying are they as good, but you can get similar production, at least when you look at it from a valuation standpoint and your entire roster about putting talented individuals in other positions. You shouldn't take running backs in the top 10. It's as simple as that.
Right, and then you get to that situation because Ezekiel Elliott is obviously a very key guy for them with what they do. And that kind of goes on to what you do with Prescott and his money. You take Ezekiel Elliott away from him, how effective is Prescott? What are you going to pay him if Ezekiel Elliott's not there?
Well, yeah, and from their perspective, quarterback to me is even tougher, not because of the value of the position. It's off the charts, and that's the problem. Dak Prescott is good.
Yeah,
but he's not great.
It's like to make an NBA reference, it's like when you have – there's only how many Batman in the NBA? There's a lot of Robins, and Kyrie Irving's finding out that being the Batman ain't the coolest job in the world, or it's not the easiest job in the world. And in football, there's only so many Batman quarterbacks. There's a lot of good ones, but only so many of them that can put you on that next level.
Yeah, and they're going to be in the Kirk Cousins situation where Minnesota is, or where the Jets, if they would have signed him. If you're good, you're going to get a lot of money at that position.
Yeah.
But you're not great, and you're probably not going to help that team win a championship. That's why it's hard. It's hard. On the other hand, if you go the other direction and say he's not good enough, well, you got to have somebody to replace him who's probably going to be worse. So it is, in a lot of ways, a catch-22. And that's why when you do get the quarterback, and this is where I don't agree with people look at the high-priced quarterbacks and they'll say Aaron Rodgers hasn't won. Well, it's not just the quarterback. You have to do some other things right as well. But you have a big leg up if you have one of those guys, one of those Batmen, as you say. You have a huge leg up. And if you get one of those quarterbacks, you hold on to them like grim death. You do not give them up.
Couple quick things that just came in. Doug Baldwin released and Cam Chancellor released. Both failed their physicals with the Seahawks, and there's been a lot of talk that they may never play again.
Yeah, well, no question with Cam, and that's very disappointing for Doug Baldwin, who turned into a really good receiver. But they knew it was certainly coming, and that's another shift from Seattle, who I just mentioned when they were having those Super Bowl runs. That was the most talented team in football. Now it's a lot different because they had to pay the quarterback. And the Eagles are going to be in that situation. By the way, I'm surprised you didn't ask me about the big community announcement. Everybody was running around with the people going nuts. They thought the Super Bowl was coming here. They thought Carson Wentz was getting an extension. I tried to calm them all down.
Yeah. What is your prediction? Is it going to be a dog park?
They just announced Lincoln Financial Field will be called Lincoln Financial Field until 2034.
Oh, wow. The link is there.
The link is the link until 2034. But, by the way, Mike, I just tweeted this. We talked about the XFL TV deal. People talking about sponsorships. Look at that deal. The Eagles just got $170 million, which sounds impressive to continue naming the field Lincoln Financial Field. But you break it down, that's $12.14 million a year. That's it. That won't be able to pay for half of Carson Wentz's contract.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I don't like the advertisements on the NBA jerseys. The money is just so insignificant to the bottom line. Why cheapen your jersey with the ridiculous ads on them when the amount of money that they get for those ads isn't changing anybody's life.
No, I agree with it, and that shifted the way soccer, obviously so popular worldwide, did that, and they had sponsors, and the NBA tried to jump on that train. I agree with you, but while I say that,
Jeff Mosher was pissed that you keep agreeing with me too much.
Once you do it, everybody's pissed when we agree.
I know.
Everybody's pissed when we agree. But we agree more often than we don't agree. It's just that when we don't agree, we don't pretend like we do agree. Other people pretend to get along. But I will say this. The Sixers have a great opportunity right in front of their face for a New Jersey sponsor, WebMD.
I like it. That's John McMullen. It's Football at 4 at JF McMullen. And we'll talk tomorrow. Minicamp opens tomorrow. We'll talk a lot of rookies on tomorrow's show. Thanks, pal.
Yeah, a lot of Andre Dillard talk. Tune in.
Yes. Miles Sanders. All right, man.
JJ.
Take care.
See you.
This hour is brought to you by First Bank of Seattle, Cape May's County's lending expert, banking for your everyday life at First Bank of Seattle. Find out how First Bank of Seattle can simplify your banking needs. Your partner since 1888, member FDIC. It's an equal housing lender.